Today I thought it was finally time to take a look at some of my favourite homebrew games on the Game Boy. I have absolutely loved being a part of this community over the past few years, and I've built up a huge amount of games, both digital and physical, as well as a wealth of knowledge about how all these games are made too. So in this video, I'm not only going to be showing you my top 10 games, I'm also going to be explaining what makes them good, so that any developers watching can actually take some notes and inspiration from this video and help to improve your games in the future as well. And now let's get on with the top 10. Number 10 is a game called the Shapeshifter 2, and this was made in Game Boy Studio. So for those of you that don't know, there's basically 4 different ways of making Game Boy games these days. Technically there's more, but let's just focus on 4 in this video. So there is, from most difficult to least difficult, it starts off with assembly language, which is a really low-level programming language, which actually allows you to control the Game Boy at its very deep root level. And then above that you have something called GBDK, which uses the C programming language, and then you can get a layer to go over GBDK called ZGB, which allows it to use a few more libraries and it makes it a little bit easier to do certain functions. And then you have Game Boy Studio as well, which was also built on GBDK, the only difference being that this actually gives you a graphical interface in order to actually build your own games from scratch. And that is what Green Boy Games has used to make this incredible game here. But it took him a long time to get to this stage where the quality was good enough for me to include in a top games list. And I actually have all of his other games here as well, and if you want to see a video that I did on these games and see just the incredible rate of improvement he made between releases leading up to his latest game, which I actually consider one of the best point-and-click style puzzle games that I've ever played, honestly. It really is a massive achievement, and the reason that this works so well and the fact that it's so good is the way the game's structured with the variety of different puzzles. You're never really unsure of what to do, and it also uses all of the different functions within GB Studio really well. You have full-screen pictures with interactive elements, you have the walking around sections, you have multiple sprites, and sprite scaling in some places as well, and it also incorporates all of the different game genres that are included in the engine too, so you can tell that it's taken a lot of time and effort to actually make this game and to craft it into what it finally became, and that is why I'm including Shapeshifter 2 in my top 10 Game Boy homebrew games list. Now on to number 9, and I've been trying to mix up the games in this so they include all the different ways that I mentioned of creating the games, and with that said, the next one here is Super JetPak DX by Asobi Tech, and this one was made in GBDK. It was actually made a long time ago in the old style GBDK when that was first around in the late 90s, but a few years ago he went back, polished the game up and gave it a full physical release, and the reason I think this works so well is it's the perfect style of game for the Game Boy. GB Studio is great, but it produces these big sprawling adventures sometimes, and developers get a little bit carried away and kind of forget the essence of what makes a Game Boy game, and that is the pick up and play nature of games like this. Of course this was already based on an existing game, but the fact that he took it and reprogrammed it, repurposed it into a Game Boy Color game, and it plays flawlessly as well, is just such an incredible achievement. And if you are interested in getting yourself a physical copy, there is actually a third print run on right now, so hopefully it's still on by the time this video goes live. I'll leave a link in the description, but all you need to know, it's a really well programmed game and it fits the style of game that I would personally enjoy on the Game Boy perfectly, so that is why I included Super JetPak DX on this list. Now for a game in another style of game engine. This one was made in ZGB and this is called POWA. And you can really tell what ZGB actually allows you to do, because a lot of the games, kind of like GB Studio, feel quite similar, but you can really tell the time and attention to detail and the polish that the developer put into making this game feel unique. And honestly, this game feels like it could have been released back when the Game Boy was new. It really wouldn't feel out of place next to Kirby's Dream Land 2 or something like that. Again, it's the perfect type of game for the Game Boy. It's quite a short game, and it has a very steep difficulty curve, which is something that a lot of these games are actually lacking, which back in the day, you would actually be required to replay a game over and over and over again in order to try and get better at it. That's kind of how the developers padded the games out. And it actually works really well today too, so if you are a developer, don't be worried about upping the difficulty, and don't be worried about people needing to restart the game in order to get better at it, in order to progress. It makes games like POWA a lot more enjoyable because you do have that replay value. Whereas a lot of the other games, I tend to just play through once and then never touch again because they're more story driven, they're more play it once and forget about it kind of experiences, whereas this is a game that I can always go back to and always enjoy. So if you are a Game Boy developer and you're watching this, like I said earlier, you can go really in depth and go all the way down to assembly language, and that is exactly what Simon Jameson did with Doc Cosmos, and just the fact that this game exists is a monumental achievement. It actually began life as a Commodore 64 game, and he ported it to the Game Boy Color, everything intact, all the animations, all the levels, all the music. It plays really well. You can tell that the game just isn't struggling at all, thanks to the fact that it's using assembly. And the most impressive thing about this is the fact that he actually live streamed the entire production of this game. So if you are interested in seeing how the Game Boy works at a really low level, definitely go ahead and check those streams out. And of course, there's also loads of other resources out there as well for Game Boy programming, no matter your skill level. I've actually been looking into it a little bit myself, but I spend all my time making videos, so I don't know where I could squeeze in trying to make a game as well. But Doc Cosmos, not only is it a very impressive achievement in the fact that it was made in assembly language, it's also just a great game as well. I did a full review of it as well, so check the link in the description and definitely check this one out afterwards. Now we're back onto a GB Studio game, and what I personally believe to be the best of the best when it comes to GB Studio, and I can explain why as well. This game is Deadeus, and like all of these other games, I did do a full review on it, so if you're interested in what you're seeing over the screen right now, go ahead and check that out. But the reason that this stands head and shoulders above the others, in my opinion, is the fact that it's actually quite restrained in a lot of ways. It's a very small map, there's no getting lost, and it's all very interconnected, it's all very cleverly woven together, and you can really tell the amount of detail and attention that the developer put into crafting this story and this world. Nothing feels out of place, nothing feels placeholdery either, like it does in a lot of other GB Studio games. And even though there's 10 different endings, the time just flew by because it actually treats the player with respect. It doesn't take too long to do any one thing in this game, and the fact that the entire overworld's only a few screens in each direction, it's really easy to remember where you were as well in order to go and do certain quests later on in the story. It's a really fascinating story as well, and the artwork in the game is just top quality as well, so that is why I rate Deadeus so highly. Now, next is a game called Indestructo Tank, which was made by the EXP, and I actually have two different versions of this. I have the original Kickstarter version, and I have the Incubate release as well. The game's identical on both though, and the reason I love this one as well goes back to the fact that it just feels like a Game Boy game. It feels like it belongs on the system. It actually started life as a Flash game, and, you know, Flash games are kind of pick up and play experiences, and that is exactly what they managed to do with this Game Boy port as well. And being programmed in GBDK, it gave the developer the freedom to experiment with the physics and get them as close as possible to the Flash original. I think it feels really, really good on the system, and like I said, like a lot of the other games, and it actually respects your time as a player as well. There's no waiting around in this. You go straight from the title screen, straight into the game, straight onto the high score leaderboards at the end, and that is what I value personally in a Game Boy game. Let me know down in the comments below whether you think the Game Boy needs more quick, fast-paced, pick-up-and-play style games like this. Those sort of really simple experiences, but ones that you can actually progressively get better and better at the more time you put into them. Next is a game called Black Castle, and once again I have two different versions here. I have this version here, which was from Community Releases, which is a forum that actually releases physical homebrew games, which is really cool. And then I also have this release here, which was set up by Ferrante Crafts, which is a brilliant Etsy store where you can actually pick up a lot of the games that you saw on my desk at the start. So if you want to grab yourselves physical copies of Game Boy games, Ferrante Crafts is a great place to look. But the reason I love this game so much is the fact that the physics and the way this game feels just feels absolutely fantastic. It's by far the best homebrew platformer that I've played on the system. There really is no competition. This game does everything right. It doesn't overstay its welcome. In some ways it kind of feels like the original Mario Land, where it's a very simple game where you're just moving from left and right. The sprites are kind of small and the tiles are all really small but really well detailed as well. There's also a load of secrets in the stages which adds to the replay value, and there's a nice range of simple little different weapons to use throughout the game as well. It also has a really good difficulty curve where the game progressively gets more and more difficult the further you get into it. I haven't managed to finish it just yet, but I do plan to at some point, and I haven't actually done a review of this one either, so maybe I'll give this one a go on stream at some point and try and actually play it all the way through to the end. And if you do want to catch me on stream, then check out Twitch. I go by RetroBreak Games over there because RetroBreak was already taken, damn it, but check the links in the description and you can come and watch me play some Game Boy stuff and just play some random games in general as well. I've been having a lot of fun over there. But back on the topic of game developers and taking inspiration and advice from this video, you can actually get the entire source code of this game on GitHub as well, so I'll put a link in the description to that. I was actually studying it in order to try and understand a bit about GBDK myself as well, and it was really good to be able to see a full finished product with all of the code laid out. It really gives you a good idea of how to actually structure a game in GBDK. So thank you so much to 7FH for putting that together for everyone and actually making it a free and open resource for people to check out. And thank you as well for just making an absolutely fantastic game for the system too. Now, I know I said this was a top 10, but I'm kind of going to cheat and include 3 different ones here, because they're all really impressive in their own right, and I really couldn't pick between either of these 3. So we have DMG Deals Damage, which is a kind of Smash TV style game where you're going around different rooms and you fight in different retro handheld systems. It's such a fun concept, and like a lot of the other games that I've mentioned, it's really easy to pick up and play, and it has that one more go factor as well. And the way that it was programmed, I love the punch that this game's got. There's just something about the game feel in this that makes it feel really polished compared to a lot of the other homebrew games that I've played. It really does feel good to pick up the different systems and throw them against the wall to move on to the next area. It's just really well programmed and it's a really fun game. And talking of games that are really well programmed, this game is just insane. This is one of the first homebrew games that I actually found out about on the system, and it's been around for a while. It's called Dangan GB, and it's actually a bullet hell shooter for the original Game Boy, which, when I first saw it, my mind was just blown, and it still is to this day. I was playing this one on stream when I was trying out the Game Boy Interceptor recently, and some people in chat were trying to explain to me how it works, but it still seems like witchcraft to me. I think it uses some of the background tiles to actually draw to the screen rather than using sprites, but the effect is incredible, and the game's really fun to play as well, so I just had to include this one. And the other game that I wanted to show was another shoot 'em up, but this one is a lot more traditional in its approach. This is a more recent release by Incubate, and this one is actually a proper vertical scrolling shooter for the system that actually runs in both black and white and colour, which is something you might want to think about if you're making a game for yourself. If you want to add colour into it, you can actually also make it run on the DMG as well. And I love the fact that I actually used a black cartridge, which is the correct way of doing it. Don't use a clear cartridge if your game's going to run on an original system, because that's just confusing. But this is actually a great game. It has a range of different characters to choose from, and they all have their different styles of attacking. It just feels really good to play. It's really well programmed. There's hardly any slowdown, and it's just really impressive as well to see it running on the system. So the final one in my list, which I guess has become a top 13 now, is actually the first homebrew game that I ever did a video on, and I still honestly believe that it's one of the best that's ever been made to this day. That is Tobu Girl DX. And again, it's an arcade style game. It's kind of pick up and play. It's very easy to get to grips with. It's got a very unique gameplay style as well. There's nothing else really like this. There's games that are similar, but the way they actually tied all of the different gameplay elements together in this makes for a really unique gaming experience. And something that I didn't bring up that I think I should mention now as well, it also has an incredible soundtrack. And the Game Boy is actually really well known for having a really good sound chip. and games like Tobu DX, with an absolutely incredible soundtrack by Potato Teto, it just really elevates the experience for me, especially listening to it on the original system. It just really adds to the immersion, it adds to the atmosphere of the game, and some of these chiptune composers, like Potato Teto, like Scott Szymanski, like Tronimal, there's so many of you out there, you know who you are. I love hearing incredible soundtracks on the Game Boy, and when they're included in games like this, it just elevates the entire experience for me. So as well as all of these physical games, I also wanted to highlight just a few download-only ones as well, because it's not fair to not include them just because they haven't got round to making a physical cartridge or getting hold of a publisher just yet. So a really old one that I played way back in the day that I actually thought was really good was a game called Bouncing Ball. It's incredibly simple, but simplicity, I think, is key when it comes to making a good Game Boy game. I still remember that game all these years later, and it really did leave an impression on me. The fact that you can make a really simple game and it can still be played and enjoyed by a lot of people. Because of the system that it's released on, you don't need to go through great lengths to make amazing gameplay, to make amazing graphics. You just need to have something that's simple, fun, enjoyable, and replayable. I honestly think that's what it boils down to. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we do have big sprawling adventures like Repugnant Bounty, which I talked about in my last video, which is just an absolutely outstanding, incredible achievement and a real testimony to what Game Boy Studio can actually do if it's put in the hands of a really talented developer. Everyone who is thinking about making a Game Boy Studio game should definitely check out Repugnant Bounty, because it just blew my mind and it really goes to show what's possible with the engine. Don't feel limited by the built-in nature of GB Studio, because when you do put the effort in to break away from that mold, you really can create an incredible game with it, as Starlab managed to show, and I really hope it does get a physical release soon as well. And of course, if it does get a physical release, I will be sharing it all over YouTube, all over Twitter, everywhere that I have a platform I'll be sharing it. So don't forget to leave a comment below if you want to win a copy of this game right here, which is actually a really fun game. I may actually class this one as number 11 in my top 10, so leave a comment down below to let people know what you think makes a good Game Boy game, and I'll pick a winner in a few weeks' time, as I said. And until then, thank you so much for watching. Please consider checking out Patreon if you want to join everyone going across here and get access to behind the scenes content. Click the playlist up here to watch videos on many different homebrew games that I've done over the years, and I'll see you very soon for the next episode. Goodbye.